Greetings, everyone. This is Canadian Meets the South. I don't remember the episode because it's been well over a year. Last time I did an episode, Danielle Smith was still running to be leader of the United Conservative Party, and now she's the leader and subsequently the Premier of Alberta. So, today's review will be on Colin Woodard's book, American Nations, published in 2012. And it's kind of like a modern version of David Hackett Fisher's Albion's Seed, which was published in 1989, I believe, or 1990. But Woodard identifies 11 nations instead of, you can say, the big four in Albion's Seed. To recap, Albion's Seed lists first New England, which is run by Yankee Puritans, then Virginia, or at least coastal Virginia, which was run by Anglicans, then the Quakers, who were in Pennsylvania, and the Appalachians, people from uh, who were largely Presbyterians, and each of them came from different parts of the British Isles. The Puritans came from East Anglia, which were 7 counties in eastern England. The Anglicans in Virginia came from the south and the west of England, and these guys were royalists, loyal to the king during the English Civil War, while um, the sorry, while the Puritans were loyal to the Parliament and Oliver Cromwell during the Civil War. The people in Pennsylvania, the Quakers, um, well, how do I say this? Pennsylvania was founded by William Penn, and it was the closest thing to a freedom of religion society. They tolerated all religions as long as they um, worshipped Jesus Christ. And then the Appalachian people from uh, the Scottish lowlands and Northern Ireland, so mainly Presbyterians, they Hackett Fisher liked to anarchists, and the other 3 nations referred to them as savages. Now, Hackett Fisher mm, does list a few smaller nations in his book towards the end, but what Woodard does is expand on not just those nations, but says it's more like there are 6 well, there are 11 nations, and some of them came, after the War for Independence. They were developed after the War for Independence. So let's talk about them. So some before New France, well, which is not just Quebec, also you can say the French part of New Brunswick and the southern part of Louisiana. They were, of course, French speakers. The French colonists were uh, a lot more tolerant compared to their English counterparts, and Woodard describes them as the most liberal people on the continent. And well, just looking at Canada, yeah, they have been driving our federation further and further left, whether it be Trudeau's, either of the Trudeaus, or just looking at the Bloc Québécois. Then we have the New Netherland, or um, now known as New England. And this is the most diverse place in North America. They had, for a long time, Muslims, or from Turkey and Egypt, not just Jews and Christians. And New Netherland, of course, was started by the Dutch, and they became a minority quickly. And like because the this was New York is built on commerce, and for and to make money, and so they tolerated everyone, not necessarily celebrated everyone, but they tolerated everyone if it meant having more money, if it meant, yeah, the bottom line gets higher. And then we have the Deep South, whom Colin Woodard uh, kind of repeatedly bashes, because in the book it's kind of clear he has a bias. He's from Maine, so he's from Yankeedom, or New England. Although, uh, for him, Yankeedom extends to Nova Scotia and New Brunswick as well, like the Atlantic provinces, and maybe even Newfoundland and PEI. But and also to um, a little bit in the West, so like Ohio, Michigan, Illinois, Indiana, I think. But yeah, there's a bias against the Deep South. And while coastal Virginia felt embarrassed about having slaves, sometimes even calling slavery a necessary evil, the South, well, the Deep South was started by slavers in Barbados who immigrated to Charleston and changed the region. Now, and to I guess be a slavocracy, where rich white people would be at the top and everyone else, especially the black slaves, were at the bottom. And he's saying it's characterized by, like, politics is deeply racially driven. Whether a man is black or white is often is an indicator of which party he belongs to, and they belong to separate parties, the black and the white men, supposedly. But um yeah, he he distinguishes that from the other two southern nations, the Appalachian nation, which, to be fair, is not just restricted to the south; it goes all the way to Pennsylvania and New York, and then Tidewater, which is not just eastern eastern coast of Virginia, also the northeastern part of North Carolina and some parts of Maryland and Delaware, but that part has been restricted. Not too many. The culture of that nation hasn't really been going to the west too much. And then let's talk about the other nations. There's the left coast. So we're talking about the coast of British Columbia, Washington, Oregon, no, northwestern California, or not just northwest, just like the coast of California is really leftist. And these were originally settled by Yankees, but the Yankees don't make a majority of the population, but they do have a cultural influence. And that's why both the left coast and New England vote the way they do. Then they're often in a group, in a voting bloc together with New Netherland. Then there's the far west, but not the west coast. So we're talking about interior British Columbia, and we have Alberta, well, as well as interior California, interior Washington, interior Oregon, and then we have Alberta and Saskatchewan, and then underneath them, Montana, the Dakotas, Iowa. Sorry, um, I don't know if Iowa's there, but have these, um, yeah, the far west, but not the west, but not the left coast. These guys are libertarians, and they want to be free from the federal government, so to do their own economic things. You could say they're economic populists. Some actually are socialists. And then you have El Norte, which is northern Mexico and, you know, southern California, southern Texas, well, like Texas, Arizona, Nevada, New Mexico, those those places. They, of course, are characterized by speaking Spanish, Mexican Spanish. So I wouldn't refer to southern Florida as part of El Norte, considering that most of the Spanish there is Cuban Spanish. But yeah, and the thing about the Spanish, New Spain, was that many of the Spanish explorers did not bring women with them when they came to the Americas. So it was natural for the Spanish to have children with the native women. And then the final nation, or you could consider it the first nation, was, um, yeah, like the first nations, the native people. So that's basically the northern part of Canada, um, and a lot of Alaska, including like not. I'm not just talking about the Canadian territories. So Nunavut, Northwest Territories, and Yukon, but also the northern parts of each of the provinces are also, um, treaty lands, but like the First Nations people or Aboriginals, and yeah, that must be 11. So 11 nations. I learned a lot from this book. It's I would say it's a good book until maybe towards the end, in which he bashes the three southern nations, especially the deep south, but also, Tidewater and Appalachia, forming a southern bloc, and how these guys, all they cared about is race. I don't like how he, you know, leaves out that there was racism in other nations. New England had Jim Crow in the 1830s. Connecticut and Massachusetts had Jim Crow cars like of the trains. So he's making it as if the South is no, this is or the Southern nations are the big problems, especially the Deep South. And then he shows he gives the example of Canada. What would happen if we had a federation without the Deep South? And this is how it is, where the West, the far West, is fighting for, I guess, more free markets, or at least freedom from the federal government, while as the left coast, Yankeedom, and New France are all pushing towards the left, and he is saying that out of the three federations in North America, that Canada is the most stable, despite the fact that New France had two referendums, although both of them were failed referendums. And he said, but the second referendum succeeded because of failed to succeed because of the native population voting overwhelmingly in against voting overwhelmingly no on the question, the referendum question in 1995. What else can I say? Yeah, it's a very detailed book. I like learning about how the Woodard is, you could say, abrasive of the proposition nation myth. I mean, I think he's supposedly a leftist. I don't really follow him on social media, if he does have a social media, but he's a he embraces the proposition nation myth. But I like how he exposed Canada's loyalist myth, the myth that after the War for Independence, all the good British subjects loyal to the king went to Canada, and he showed that was not true, because in Ontario, it was a lot of, although a lot of it was, a lot of the immigration after the war was Quaker, were Quakers from Pennsylvania who, due to their religion of, they believed in pacifism and they refused to fight for either side. And then also some people from New Netherland who also, many people in New Netherland refused to fight for either side as well. So they were scared what was gonna happen with in New York. Like what would they weren't sure where the revolution was gonna go. Like a lot of people just were on the sidelines. They refused to fight for either side, but especially the Quakers and some New Yorkers or New Netherlanders. And yeah, many of the New Netherlanders, well, I mean, they still a significant amount still spoke Dutch. I'm not sure about now. And in Pennsylvania, many people spoke German. And yeah, they went to Ontario. As for Nova Scotia and New Brunswick. Um, Many of these guys are culturally Yankees, and they were, how do I say this? And in 1812, many of them refused to fight against the Americans in the War of 1812 because they considered New Englanders as their brothers, and likewise New Englanders considered the guys from Nova Scotia and New Brunswick to be, their brothers, their cousins. They are culturally Yankees, and many New Brunswickers and Nova Scotians were accused of being Republicans by actual good British subjects loyal to the king. And so it's good that he blows the myth of Canada being loyal to the king, even though that's not how they felt after the American War for Independence. That's not how many of them felt. See, Quebec is different. Well, because in 75 and no, in 76, Washington tried to believe that Quebec was strategically important, but so his troops went into Quebec, and many people in Montreal especially greeted them. But then they failed. They had a failed battle, and then when they retreated, they either stole from the French-speaking population there, or they gave them worthless currency to take in exchange for their goods. So after Washington's failure in Quebec, the Quebecers they didn't want to see the Patriots anymore. But yeah, it's a very interesting story. Like, I live in the Greater Toronto area, and this is the Midlands. So this is where the Quakers, many of the German-speaking Quakers, settled, and yeah, they in here we do believe in, I guess, tolerance of other religions, maybe more so than other people. But like that, this is, how do I say this? This is what David Hackett Fisher called, I don't know if it was hegemonic liberty or it could have been something else, where there is religious freedom is valued. I say for now, if that's what the tradition has been, but I'm looking to go to the west, the far west, particularly Alberta. Somehow I can't get to Alberta, then yeah, I would go to Saskatchewan, because I'm sure Saskatchewan is. I would like it better. But these are the far west. I wouldn't want to go to interior BC because BC is ruled by the NDP. And then this is another thing, because he talks about in the book how from an ethnographer's or a cultural uh, demographic point of view, um, state and province lines are arbitrary. But that being said, it is the states and the provinces that have the power. And yeah, yes, cultures bleed through the different boundaries of the states and provinces, but it is the governments and like the states and provinces that have the powers. So yeah. Now, right now, let's talk about current events. So Danielle Smith, she's been premier for about a year now. Earlier this year, there was Alberta had an election, and the UCP lost some seats, but they still retained a majority. They said it was due to the Alberta Party not existing to take some leftist votes, but now the Alberta Party votes went to the NDP. But yeah, next, there have been a lot of things. There's last month, October 7th, I believe, there was a Hamas attack on Israel, and now there's a big fight. I guess a divide in the right between, you can call it, the neoconservatives, who seem to have a pro-Israel foreign policy, and if you want to call them the paleo conservatives, or the Trumpsters, many the MAGA people. They believe in putting America first, and they don't want a single dollar going to fund the Israel Hamas war. And yeah, um, then you would see, I guess, a lot of pro-Palestinian and even pro-Hamas rallies across North America. And so the Jews, who, I guess, forgive me for saying this, but they tend to vote left, and often they wanted more and more immigration. Many of these pro-Hamas, pro-Palestinian people, these guys are, who will show up in the rallies. Many of these are immigrants, and so what's happened is that now you can say the it's like, it's not just divided the right, it's also, you can say, divided the left. You can say the moderate leftists who agree with the moderate or neoconservatives are pro-Israel, and then you can say, I don't know, the far left, as in the people who push for like queers for Palestine, are somehow in a cultural alliance with the pro-Hamas people. I don't. The thing is, if you say it's just a Jewish Muslim dichotomy, it's it's not, because many Palestinians are Christians, and there have been some Christians who've been dying now in, you can call it, Gaza, and yeah, there's now like there's a there's a divide, you can say, in both the right and the left. And in Canada, Justin Trudeau he's being bashed by both. He's he's being bashed by like the pro-Israel lobby for not being pro-Israel enough, and then being bashed by the pro-Palestinian Hamas rally, lobby, or whatever you want to call it, the faction, who think that giving any legitimacy to Israel is unacceptable. So, and that's what's happening right now in on November 2023. Yeah, I know I haven't posted in a while. Like right now, I don't work. I used to work at a for a um doing a low wage job, and I'm in school right now, so hoping to get a better job. But yeah, I will at least continue to do this podcast. I have plans for the next at least two more episodes. Um, there might not be. They probably will be before January, probably or before February. But yeah, I'm going through a book right now and then another book later. But yeah, um, what else can I say? I I guess I'll make another video when on the day that or the time I move to Alberta, because if I haven't made it clear already, I want to go to Alberta. And yeah, I it's how do I say this? There are, I guess, a lot of culture wars now. There's there's a housing crisis as well, and neither the liberals nor the conservatives are going to decrease immigration, but the large amounts of immigration is affecting the housing crisis, as well as affecting culture. If you bring in too many immigrants at a single time, they're not gonna have. They're not gonna assimilate, and then they might bring their cultural wars from their original countries to here. But yeah, that's all I'm saying. That's I I would say that to end off that it was overall a good book, American Nations by Colin Woodard. You will see that there is some bias against the South because none he this is different from that Pulitzer Prize winning uh, biography of John C. Calhoun by this woman from Massachusetts back in 1950. That I'm struggling to come up with her name because that wasn't harsh on the as harsh on the South, but yeah. Thank you for watching Canadian Meets the South. I intend to upload some more in the not so distant future. Bye for now.